Hi, my name's Itali, and in this video I'll be showing you how to colour using a colour blend mode layer. If you'd like to see more videos like this, then consider subscribing to my channel. And I have prepared myself a monotoned, fully shaded picture to use as an example, but first off we're going to go through how the different colours work on colour layers. So I've just got a bunch of really saturated colours on a layer, and I'm going to change that layer to a colour layer to show you how it affects my shaded picture below. Now the body of the dragon is a little bit above mid-tone grey, and the membranes are quite a light grey, and you can see that it affects these colours in different ways. Now one of the main things you need to keep in mind when you are colouring in this method is that if you want a colour to be a light colour, you need to make sure you have shaded in a light colour, or it's just going to end up a dark or washed out version of that colour. There are also some colours that do require to have a darker base in order for them to appear as their fully saturated colours. Those are the colours like red and a dark blue. They need to have a darker base in order for them to appear the way you'd like them to. So what I'm going to do here is I'm just going to take these saturated colours of the rainbow, and we're going to show you what it looks like in black and white. So you can see this middle section here, which contains the red, pink, blue and purple, is much darker than the other ends of the spectrum. So if you know you're going to be making your picture in these darker range of colors, then make sure that when you shade your monotone image that you are selecting the shades that are darker than the mid-tone of grey. As a general rule, I like to go to the middle grey and just move it down a smidge so it is a tiny bit darker than the middle, as I find most of the colors I like to choose tend to be a bit in the darker shade than the brighter shade. So here I've labeled the spectrum so you can see what kind of tone of grey you need to use. So yellow is light, orange is a medium, and then we have the darkest blue being at the bottom, purple, pink and then red, and then after the dark blue it goes back to a medium grey, a medium light grey for a teal colour, and a medium grey for a green colour. Now obviously if you want darker versions of these colours or more pastel versions of these colours, then you also need to be keeping that in mind. Now when I originally coloured this picture, I did go with a subdued purple. So with this particular shading, I did make this image. So it's the same tones and everything, just with a colour layer over the top, and then I merge them together and add a few more colours in. But for the purpose of this video, I will do a fresh colour set so you can see exactly how I achieved this. Now if you're not sure what colours you're going to use at the time you create your monotone shaded image, then I recommend just choosing a middle tone grey and then just shading it in grey, like I've done here, and maybe add a few accents in lighter and darker colours. You can make changes to this later, and even adding patterns and lighter areas to this base shaded layer of grey. Now I do actually want to make some changes to this base, so I am going to create a clipping mask layer above the shaded layer. If you don't have access to this, then in this part you may just have to be a bit careful or erase away any parts which go over the border of your image below. Just make sure you do make it a new layer above the original image, as we are going to make some blending mode changes to this layer to affect the base below. So I'm going to start with lightening the neck area. So all I've done is I've grabbed a lighter tone of grey to the grey that is underneath, and I'm just painting the area I would like to be lighter than what I originally did. This is just a flat colour, but we are going to change the blending mode, so it will still keep the shading I've already done. It'll just make the area lighter. Now if you are going to use the same layer for darkening and lightening, then I would recommend using the overlay blend mode. You can choose some of the others if you're just lightening or just darkening, but I'm going to be doing both, so overlay is the blend mode I'd like to have. Now if I select a middle tone grey, which is the grey I used to originally shade this, you'll see when I apply it to the overlay mode, it doesn't actually affect the layer below because it's applying the same tone to the existing tone that's already there. So it doesn't sort of multiply it, it's just going over top of it. But if I use a darker or a lighter color, it does affect it. So keep that in mind when you're using the overlay. If you're not seeing any difference, it may be that you've got a tone that's too close to the original that you have on your base layer. Now we're just going to speed this up a little bit as I add some lighter and darker tones to my grey drawing so that we can get to the next stage of the video, which will be adding the actual layer that does the color blend mode layer. Now I've finished adding the different tones. You can see I still have them on separate layers to the left. I have my base original shaded layer, and then I've also got my overlay layer, which is adding the different tones of grey to my base layer. So now I'm going to create a new layer and make it a color mode layer. This does need to be above both your shaded monotone base layer and the overlay layer if you have used one. So to begin with, I'm just going to grab a random color. I really like teal and aqua, and I'm just going to bucket this color onto the entire layer. Now I have made this a clipping layer as well, so it is only affecting the very base layer, which is the next layer that is not a clipping layer. Again, if you don't have access to clipping layers, you may need to be a little bit more careful or use the select tool to select and remove any portion of the drawing which is outside of your base layer. Now this is the reason you may want to color in this way rather than the traditional way of just picking a color and shading it manually, is that now I have the choice of where I put my colors without disturbing my already shaded image. So I've picked up a different shade of sort of aqua blue, and you can see I can apply it to this drawing and I don't have to worry about having to reshade it if I've added another color into the mix. I can just mix in colors willy-nilly and just see how it looks. So let's grab another color. I'm gonna grab this light sort of greenish lime color, I guess, lemon color. And you can see it just paints over the top of that lighter area that we created with the overlay. And already I think it looks quite good. Now the other reason you may want to do things this way, and this is the reason why I do things this way, is that I find shading in tones of grey really helps me define a shape without having to worry about the colours that are involved. So I used to always just colour all on one layer and shade the colours once they were down, but I found like doing it this way, my pictures have come out so much more three-dimensional and has really helped me define these forms. So I recommend if you are trying to get things looking more three-dimensional and you have been struggling a little bit with it, to give this method a go and see how you feel about it. Obviously it's not for everyone. I thought it wasn't for me, but since I've tried it properly, I've changed my mind and I actually really love this method of coloring. I don't use it the whole way through. I generally use it as a way to decide on colors and to get the base colors down and have the shading nice and neat. And then once I'm happy with everything, I'll usually merge the layers back together and then add a few extra colors or add some highlights or shadows I couldn't quite get with my pre-shaded layer. So I'm going to continue to experiment with different colors and see how they affect the layers below. You can see with this bright orange that I've selected that it's generally only bright on the near white areas of the picture, as it is a bright color that is obviously a brighter tone, so it needs the brighter tone underneath. And once you get it into the darker areas, it does become a darker, almost brown instead of an orange. We're just going to quickly speed through adding a few more colors to this before we reach adding some blush tones in. Now, those of you who've known me through my art for quite some time know I'm a little bit obsessed with adding blush or bits of pink into my picture, even if it's something like a scaly dragon, which you wouldn't necessarily be able to see those tones with. Now I really like this blending method because I can just add the blush in and again, not worrying at all about the shading underneath. So I can just mix in these colors into my straight up orange and green areas of the dragon, and I don't have to worry too much about getting out the smudge tool and making those tones smudge in properly again. It's just applied to the toned layers beneath. Now the other thing I like to do is shading my shadows in different colors. So in this case, I've already shaded the dragon. So I just grabbed the different color, which in this case is a purpley deep blue, and I just apply it to areas in which I have a darker shade applied to the base layer below. I even mix in some parts that are lighter just to add some different variety into the colors I have used. And I do find this makes your picture more, I guess, dynamic and interesting to look at, rather than just having the one shade of green. Adding some different shades where it's darker or lighter can add some interest to your pictures. In a moment, I'm going to add some color into these stripes, but I just want to quickly show you what this looks like if I change it off a color layer back to a normal layer blend mode. So this is what the colors are that we actually have been using. And you can see where all the different colors are positioned and how I've used quite a wide variety of colors and how it affects the layer below when I change it back to a color layer. So I do just want to make these stripes pop out against the rest of the dragon a little bit more. So I am going to color them individually as well, still using the color layer. And we're just going to go with a bluey sort of color here and color each of the stripes individually. You can see when I actually color these, I don't always color them right to the border of the stripe that we'd originally drawn on the overlay layer, as I think it looks kind of interesting to have just this deeper color in the middle of the stripe with the more faded out tones near the edges and on the ends of the stripes. And this is what the color layer looks like now in its normal mode. Now I'm going to try out some of the other blend modes as well, as sometimes you might find something better than just using the color layer. We can try overlay or multiply or whatever you like. You might find that you enjoy the other blend modes better than just using the color, and you won't know unless you try it. So I always have a fiddle with these options as well, but in the end I did decide the color layer was best, and after all, that is the purpose of this video. We can also turn off our overlay layer and see what this would have looked like if we had less variation in our tones of grey. You can see it's a much different looking picture without adding that layer. So I do recommend adding some different variations in your tones of grey, or adding an overlay layer later on if you do want to have lighter parts or darker parts to your picture. You can also easily change the color of the picture by using the hue saturation options or color balance, or even using the negative option and just flipping the colors entirely. One thing to note, because of how the color layer works, if you try and use the light and dark slider, it's not going to have much of an effect on your picture, other than once it gets to being too bright and it becomes white, it's just going to look grey. And same with the other end, once it becomes too dark and it becomes black, then again, it's just going to go back to its grey tones. So you can't really adjust the brightness and darkness of the color layer itself. If you do want to make changes to the brightness and darkness, it needs to be done on the base layer, the toned black and white layer or grey shades. Same thing if you're going to use the brightness contrast effect, then I also recommend doing this on the shaded base layer to have the best effect. You can see if you turn the contrast right down, it's basically going to be a flat grey picture, so your colors are going to end up quite flat as well. So you want to make sure that you're not putting the contrast down too low, but you can see here the brightness and darkness works quite well if you are using the base layer and not the color layer. Just a side note on using the color balance option, if you are going to do this, I do recommend waiting until after you've merged your color layer to your base layers, as at the moment when you use the color balance, it's just affecting the color layer itself, which doesn't actually have these tones on it, so it's not going to be as useful as what it would be once it's all merged together and you can actually select or change the midtones, shadow and highlights individually. You can see here when I go to shadows and change the colors, it's actually just shading or changing the color of the dark blue I applied, no matter what area I applied that to. But when you look at the picture, that dark blue is actually a light blue on the lighter shaded areas and a dark blue in the dark areas. But these layers are not yet combined, they're actually separate layers. So do wait until after you've merged them together to use the color balance option. So at this point, I will actually stop using the color layer. We will be merging things together and making adjustments without using the color layer. So if this is all you wanted to know, then stop watching. But if you do want to see how I finish up this picture, then continue on with the rest of the video. Now I'm happy with my color layer. I am actually going to merge my 3 layers together and paint directly on the merged layers, as there are some colors that I can't quite get right or some brightness levels that I want to adjust that won't work out if I just painted them directly onto the color layer. Now, because I'm afraid of losing the original layers, what I've actually done is I've saved the image and then brought it back in as a combined image. So you can see to the left there, I still have my original 3 layers, and then above it is my new merged image, which is all 3 of those below layers all on the one layer. Now I'm again going to use a clipping layer above this new merged layer I've brought in, because again, I'm a baby and I don't want to lose stuff. And if I don't like it, I can just delete the whole layer, but you could of course just paint directly on top of this merged layer. Now I'm just going to grab a couple of different colors here and bring them in. So I usually start with this lighter color or a lighter color. I want to blend in some of this light that's coming through the membrane and just put it directly on top of the skin of the dragon so that it's more blended in with the actual light that's coming through there. I'm also going to put a little bit on the behind or back of these spikes, as they do look quite shiny, so I do think some of the colored light that's coming through would reflect off these spikes. Once I'm done with the blue, I do decide to add in a bit more purple into this picture. I think it could be a little bit more vibrant. So I just grab a sort of grayish purple color and I just put it into some of the underside reflected areas of the dragon. So just to the front of the chest here and along the neck, as well as underneath the jaw of the dragon. Again, as I mentioned earlier in the video, I just find adding in different colors does add some interest into the picture, especially if it's sort of a shiny surface or slimy as it would be in this case. More colors would be reflecting off a shinier surface. So if you want something to look shiny, then add in some of the surrounding colors as it reflects off the surface of the shiny dragon. Now that I'm happy with the new colors I've added, I'm just going to merge them together and grab my smudge tool to make some of these transitional areas a little smoother. Lastly, I want to make it a little bit more sparkly and shiny, so I'm just grabbing some really bright, high saturated colors, and I'm just putting little flecks of or spots throughout the dragon, choosing different colors here and there to make it look a little sparkly or wet. I do like the sparkly look, so I probably go a little bit overboard on this, but I do think it kind of adds some charm to the picture. I've also decided this membrane's a little too flat, so I choose a darker tone or darker color of the blue, and I bring in some lines across to make it look more like a frill or a fin. I also add some bits of white. So this is my high highlight. It's usually my very last stage of coloring. It's when I add where the shine in the eye is going to go, and any shine that would be on top of all other colors and textures. So now I've finished coloring this and editing this. This is the layer after we've merged things and edited and added a few more bits and pieces, and this is what it looks like beforehand. Now this is also the original color layer without the color mode on, and you can see my originally colored image as well. I also merged this and made adjustments after using the color layer method. Well, this is it. This is my color layer blend mode tutorial. I hope you found it useful. I really enjoy making these, so if you enjoyed them too, then let me know. Let me know if there's anything else you'd like to see. I'm more than happy to make more videos. Thanks everybody for watching. If you enjoyed the video, don't forget to give it a like, subscribe if you'd like to see more, and I also have a Patreon if you'd like to support me. Thanks again, and I'll see you all next time. Bye!